Hello everyone. My name is Travel Ted and I'm a travelling bear. Today I'm going to tell you a story about a very long car journey I went on with my best friends Ben and Annie. It was time to get up. Mr. and Mrs. Booker did not want to get up. Annie and Ben did not want to get up either. And Everywhere Bear and I most certainly did not want to get up. Today was the last day of our holiday and we did not want to go home, especially not in the car, and especially not when it was such a long way. Mr. Booker packed all of the cases into the car and we climbed in. We had colouring books and pencils for the journey. We had reading books and writing books for the journey. We even had travelling games and puzzles for the journey. But it was such a long journey, we knew we could never fit enough toys in the car to keep us from getting bored. It was sunny when we left, and the car was very hot. Ben was complaining that he was too hot, huffing and puffing and pretending to pass out. He was sticking his tongue out and panting like a thirsty dog. But Mr. Booker said there was nothing he could do about it until the car was moving. He said that once we were going, the air conditioning would make the car cooler. Ben said that he was hotter than a volcano. I bet Ben's not as hot as me, I thought, and imagined how hot he would be in a fur coat like Everywhere Bear and I were wearing. We didn't get far before Annie was thirsty. We were all thirsty, and Mrs. Booker gave us a cold drink to cool us down. It was very hot in Spain in the summer, and Mrs. Booker always says, when you are hot, it is very important to make sure that you drink plenty of water. But today, Mrs. Booker said that we should not drink too much because we would need to keep stopping for the toilet. I spy with my little eye something beginning with F, Ben said, and we all took turns at guessing. Finger, Annie shouted, but Ben said it wasn't finger. Felt tip pen, Mrs. Booker said, but it wasn't pen either. Door, Everywhere Bear said, and we all looked at him. Door doesn't start with an F, it starts with a D, Mr. Booker said. Everywhere Bear was embarrassed, but Mr. Booker said not to be because he was only little and just learning. We guessed for such a long time that Ben started shouting, Clue, 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 and we all agreed that we needed a clue. It swims, Ben said. Fish, Everywhere Bear said, and he guessed right. You didn't spy a fish, Annie said, and now Ben looked embarrassed too. It has to be something inside the car, Annie said, and Mrs. Booker and I agreed. Next, it was Everywhere Bear's turn. I spy with my little eye something beginning with P, and we all took turns at guessing again. We guessed paper, but it wasn't paper. We guessed pen, but it wasn't pen. We guessed pencil, but it wasn't pencil. Mr. Booker even guessed pedal, but pedal was wrong too. We tried plastic and packet, picture and plaster. That was my guess because Ben had a plaster on his knee. I give up, Ben said. I give up too, Annie said, and we all took it in turns to give up. It's pewter, Everywhere Bear called out. We all shook our heads and laughed. It's computer, not pewter, Mr. Booker said, and there isn't a computer in the car either, Everywhere Bear. Then Everywhere Bear laughed too. Let's play another game, Mrs. Booker said, and Ben said he wanted to play tag. We all chose a colour for a car we could look out for along the way. Ben chose blue, Annie chose red, I chose white, and Everywhere Bear chose purple. Are you sure you want to choose purple, Everywhere Bear? Mr. Booker said. Not many cars are purple. But I like purple, Everywhere Bear said. So Mr. Booker agreed that it was fine and he could be purple if that was what he wanted. We all looked out the car windows, and when we saw a car in the colour we had chosen, we shouted, Tag! And Mrs. Booker marked it down on a piece of paper in the front. It wasn't very long before Everywhere Bear was fed up. I haven't got any, he said, and we explained again that not many cars come in purple. He sulked for the rest of the game. Are we there yet? Ben asked. "No," Mr. Booker said. "We are not there yet, Ben." "Why are we stopping then?" Ben asked, and Mr. Booker explained we had to stop at a toll booth. Mr. Booker said that you had to pay money to use the road, but he looked a little bit angry and complained to Mrs. Booker that it was much too expensive after he had paid the lady in the booth. Ben opened the window and wind gushed through the car, blowing the pages on Annie's colouring book over. Whoosh! Some of the loose pages blew into the air, and as Annie reached up to grab them, she knocked Everywhere Bear out of the window. We all shouted, Annie cried, Ben didn't know what to do, and even Mr. and Mrs. Booker were worried. Mr. Booker explained that we were on the motorway and there wasn't a turning for a very, very long time, so we wouldn't be able to go back for Everywhere Bear. Mrs. Booker said that we would never find him, it was such a long road. She explained that all we could do was wish very hard that the Toy Fairy would find Everywhere Bear and bring him back to us, so we all wished very, very hard. "We'll be crossing the border into France soon," Mrs. Booker said, trying to take our minds off of Everywhere Bear. She explained that the border was an invisible line which separated Spain from France. "Can we see it?" Ben said, and Annie snapped, "No, Ben, of course we can't see it, it's invisible." When we got to the border there wasn't much to see, but as we crossed it into France, Ben said, "Look, there is a line, you can see it," and there it was in bright yellow. "Well then it isn't invisible, is it?" Annie snapped again, and Mrs. Booker said that perhaps we should stop and stretch our legs and get something to eat because everybody was getting grumpy. We stopped at a shop and Mr. Booker went inside. He came out with a big box in a bag, but he wouldn't let us know what was inside it. It was Mrs. Booker's turn to drive now, and we drove on for a very, 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 very long time. It was starting to get dark, and Mr. Booker said that we were going to sleep at a motel and drive again in the morning. We were all glad to get out of the car, even if it was only for one night. The motel was in a place called Bordeaux, and Mrs. Booker told us that Bordeaux was a very famous place, known for its wine. "That's why Dad stopped here," Ben laughed, and Mrs. Booker laughed too. Our room was not very big, and all of the beds were very close together. Annie and I wanted to sleep on the top bunk, but Mrs. Booker said no, it was too dangerous because Annie moved about too much in her sleep, and besides, Ben was older. We liked it on the bottom bunk, but we missed Everywhere Bear and went to sleep wishing the Toy Fairy would bring him back to us. I think Ben was wishing too, because as I was going to sleep, I thought I heard him say, "Please, Toy Fairy, bring my friend home safely." The next morning after breakfast, Mr. Booker put our bags into the boot, and as he did, I peeked into the box he had bought at the shop the day before, but it was empty. I don't know why he bought an empty box. Inside the car, Ben was complaining that he couldn't get comfortable and saying that something was sticking in him. He pushed his hand down behind his back and pulled out something which had been sticking in his back. It was Everywhere Bear. Everywhere Bear was so pleased to see us that he gave us all a hug, and we were so pleased to see him that we hugged him back. I think that the Toy Fairy had given Everywhere Bear a bath while he was away, because he was very, very clean now. Before long, Mr. Booker said we were at the Channel Tunnel crossing. That's a big train tunnel that goes under the sea. We had to queue behind lots of cars and show our passports to the lady in a big kiosk. We all had to look at her so that she could see that we were the same people as the people in the photographs and the passports. A little later, two men in smart blue uniforms and caps walked by the car with two dogs. The dogs sniffed along the car, and Mrs. Booker explained that they were checking that people didn't do anything or bring anything onto the trains which might be dangerous. I remembered that they had machines to do that at the airport, and Mr. and Mrs. Booker said I really did have a very good memory indeed. Mr. Booker said sometimes there were dogs at the airport too, but I've never seen any. When it was our turn, we drove onto the train in the car and the doors shut behind us. Off we went through the tunnel. We liked being on the train, and I think Mr. Booker liked it too, because he didn't have to drive anymore, but the train ride didn't take very long. We were soon at the other end of the tunnel, and although it was getting very late again, we were still in the car, but now Mrs. Booker was driving. I don't know how long we drove for after that, because Annie and I fell asleep. But when I woke up again, it was morning and I was laying in bed, with Annie's smelly foot under my nose. I didn't like it very much.